Well, welcome to the Point Loma podcast. Again, we are still talking about Revelation. We are on our fourth installment, and this is a Bible study that Pastor Karla did with the Women's Bible Study in 2023, and so we're now sharing it with you. And so hopefully you're keeping up, because I think I am, but maybe not. We'll find out. But real quick, for any of the references that we've been referencing, like the books, like Reading Revelation Responsibly or other things, we will put those in the notes of the podcast episode so you can find those in there. So
great.
Let's continue to talk about, let's get apocalyptic. Let's do it.
Great. Well, last podcast, we opened up the book of Revelation and we actually looked at the opening verses. Just to recap, we've gone through the overarching interpretations. There's 4 of them. We're not going to go through them again. Go back and listen if you want to hear about that.
Totally.
We've talked about the genre of the book, the author, the context of the book. And the context is super important because the context is the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire, not just the Roman Empire as a Roman Empire, but also the ordinary Roman Empire or the evils that are with us every day.
Babylon is kind of where they go. Yeah.
So today we're going to get a little further into chapter 1.
Okay. We're opening it early,
get your
guys.
Bible, Aro, because we're going to be going back to in the Old Testament.
Am I going back or forward first?
Let's start with Revelation.
Start with the end in mind.
So if you remember from our last podcast, this is the Revelation. Apocalyptus is the word. It's not revelations. It's one revelation of Jesus Christ. So this book is about Jesus Christ. Okay, so we have to remember that. There's nothing new in this book.
Right.
There's nothing new, and that's going to be shocking to some of our hearers. And that Christ gave, this revelation was given of Jesus Christ, which God gave to Jesus Christ to give to John on the island of Patmos. And this was meant, because it's apocalyptic literature, to be a blessing to the people, to be heard, read, or not read, but actually heard, and then to be a blessing to those that were struggling. Mm-hmm. This is out of crisis. And so we already went through this, that the most important thing to know about the genre that blew our mind last time was that this is a letter.
Yes.
Which tells us what again?
That it's personal, and it's relational, and there's love there, there's care.
Yes, and then it's meant for a specific time period.
Yes, it's meant for those people.
Yes,
not
for those
us,
people.
you mean?
Well, it's meant for us too, I think, but it's also meant for those people. So John, in verse 4 of chapter 1, John to the 7 churches that are in Asia. This is Asia Minor,
right?
Which is kind of like the Wild West. And these are churches that are scattered throughout Asia Minor. We're going to get into them next podcast, but they are small churches. This isn't like mega churches in Asia Minor.
Right.
These are like groups of 15 people, 30 people, 50 people in these enormous Roman cities.
Right.
So they're pretty insignificant.
Right.
They're pretty insignificant within the Roman Empire. Okay. But the vision starts out like this, verse 9. You want to read it?
Verse 9, yeah. I, John, your brother, who share with you in Jesus the persecution and the kingdom and the patient endurance, was on the island called Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet saying, write in a book what you see and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamum, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Pergamum. Oh, wait, I already went there. To Sardis, to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea. I just wanted to read them again. Sorry.
So let's stop right there. Write in a book what you see. I think that's really important. This is a vision. So John's trying to explain through understandable words or symbolic words what he sees. Remember, this is not meant, it's hard to do that.
Right.
It's hard to do that. How do you describe what you see? Because this is a visceral experience. It involves all of your senses, right? When you go to a play, it's a very different experience than reading a book,
right?
You know, and so how do you describe tone?
Right, like the whole picture is worth 1,000 words, but it's like in that 1,000 words, you got to describe everything that's happening. Yeah,
right. How do you describe smell? How do you describe these things? And so John's trying to do that, and that's very difficult to do. Okay, keep going.
Then I turned to see whose voice it was that spoke to me. And on turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the midst of the lampstands, I saw one like the Son of Man, clothed with a long robe with a golden sash across his chest. His head and his hair were white as white wool, white as snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined as in a furnace. And his voice was like the sound of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and from his mouth came a sharp two-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining with full force.
Keep going.
Dude, when I saw him, I fell at his feet, of course. Sorry. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. But he placed his right hand on me, saying, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last, and the living one. I was dead, and see, I am alive forever and ever, and I have the keys of death and of Hades. Now write what you have seen, what is, and what is to take place after this. As for the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and in the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches."
Oh, there's so much in here already. Okay, so this is still the introduction to the book of Revelation.
Yeah, we're just getting warmed up.
Yes, and what you just read in verses 12, basically through 16, 17, is essentially a repeat of a very similar scene in the book of Daniel.
Okay.
So let's go back. Let's go back to Daniel. Daniel chapter 10, for those of you that want to open your Bible with us, that are listening. Daniel chapter 10. If you remember, Daniel takes place prior to Christ.
Correct.
So this is pre-Christ. So read what it says, Daniel 10, 4 through 9. Read that for us.
Daniel 10, 4 through 9. Here we go. On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, I looked up and saw a man clothed in linen.
This is Daniel, by the way.
This is Daniel saying this, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I looked up and saw a man clothed in linen. This is Daniel who saw him, with a belt of gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze. I feel like I read that somewhere.
Totally.
And the sound of his words were like the roar of a multitude. I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. The people who were with me did not see the vision, though a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled and hid themselves. So I was left alone to see the great vision. My strength left me, and my complexion grew deathly pale, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and when I heard the sound of his words, I fell into a trance, face to the ground.
Oh my gosh. So I want you to think about that vision in Daniel that you just read.
Right.
Pre-Christ.
Right.
Vision in Revelation, similar vision, post-Christ.
Right.
And they're almost identical.
Yeah.
When you see, whatever Daniel saw and his interpretation of it and writing it for us is the exact thing that John saw.
Right.
A man dressed in linen in Daniel, a man wearing an ankle-length robe in Revelation, a belt of fine gold around the waist in Daniel, a gold sash around the chest. It's so similar. Eyes were like fiery torches in Daniel. Eyes were like fiery flames in Revelation. Arms and feet look like burnished bronze, very similar in the book of Revelation. A voice in Daniel like the roar of the multitude, a voice like the sound of rushing water. And what happens? Daniel falls face down into unconsciousness as a result of this vision.
Right.
John, same thing, falls down
like he was
as
dead.
though he were dead.
Right.
So Daniel and John are seeing the same person. They're seeing the same vision. Why does this matter? Because in Daniel, we have this pre-incarnate Christ. This is the Christ figure, by the way, who unveils, we know in the book of Daniel, the future to Daniel. And then at the end, in Daniel chapter 4, flip over to chapter 12.
Okay.
Chapter 12, verse 4.
I like 4. Okay. Yeah.
Tell us what it says.
In chapter 12, verse 4, it says, "But you, Daniel, keep the word secret and the book sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be running back and forth, and evil shall increase."
Oh, so in some translations, it actually says, seal up this scroll. Seal up this scroll. So he sees this vision. Daniel is given a full vision, the same vision that John is going to be given, the whole thing, but he doesn't tell us the rest of the vision. He only tells us up to the time of Christ, Daniel does. Seal up that scroll. You don't understand it. It's for another time. It's because then in Revelation, what we're seeing is the risen and glorified Christ. This is so important. In the book of Revelation, unseals this scroll to reveal to John what Daniel had sealed back in the Old Testament. Does that make sense?
It does.
So there's a continuation here because we know that in Revelation 1:1, which we read last week, this revelation, what must happen soon. So now the seal, this very same seal, is going to be unscrolled,
Right.
unsealed. What do you think about that?
Well, it's like the continuing of the story. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I had a couple of things. So this is the skeptic in my mind, right? So Daniel had this vision, and he was alone. But I thought it was interesting because he says I was alone, and I was the only one that saw it, but other people felt it, right? And whenever people go and read their scripture, and they're like, "Oh, this is the word from God that I got," and you're just like, "Dude, come on, where's your community?" Right? So I get skeptical about that. I probably shouldn't be, but maybe I should. I don't know. And then I'm wondering if like John wants so badly the revelate this to reveal Christ that he's almost like he's familiar with the story. So is he like playing it out? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Is he like pretending himself that he's seeing that? So I don't know.
But then you would have to
That's me
debunk
being
the whole
skeptical,
scriptures.
right?
Yeah.
That's me being like skeptical. But I don't. Yeah, it's and obviously then the question would be, why haven't other people tried to pretend to do that?
Right.
So I know my flaw in my argument, but that's what I was thinking of the whole time. I was like, oh, God, that's
so this is
but it's pretty
the
amazing.
Christ in the Old Testament. The Christ comes in the flesh, and now the Christ is revealing himself as the or the post-incarnate risen, glorified Christ.
And it tells me that Christ, whenever you hear in Scripture that Christ was, is, and will be forever, that this is the was. He was always with us. He's never. It wasn't like he did come at a certain place and time and reveal himself as human, but he was always.
Yes, and so this is connecting God and Christ as one.
Yes.
So we have to realize that.
That's huge.
So let's unpack for a sec. So let's actually.
Sorry, I went tangent there, but anyway.
And then Revelation 1:19 says these words: "Now write what you have seen, what is, and what is to take place after this." We see just in this one verse the overarching context of Revelation, how we should interpret it. Now write what you have seen, what is, and what is to take place after this. Write what you have seen, the vision. What is the churches, which we're going to get to in next week, and what will take place, what is to come in the future and in the present for those churches, as well as the future for the church with a capital C. And then he starts to unpack parts of this vision, which already speaks something to us in verse 20. "As for the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." All this tells us already, he already begins to unpack this vision and give us words for the symbolism that is here.
So you don't have to read into the symbolism.
You don't have to read into it. It's not a secret.
Yes.
It's what are the 7 stars? What are the 7 lampstands? The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, which might be the leaders of the 7 churches. We don't know. Angels just simply means messenger.
Okay.
And the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches itself. So we go back to the beginning then of verse 12 for chapter 1. "Then I turned to see whose voice it was that spoke to me, and turning I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the lampstands, who was there? The risen and glorified Christ." Son of Man, that is the risen and glorified Christ. Standing where? Where was he standing?
Oh, sorry, I lost my place there. He was standing
in verse 13?
In verse I saw the 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the lampstands, amidst them, I saw one like the Son of Man.
And then the lampstands are what?
They are the lampstands are the churches themselves.
Churches.
Right? I see what you're saying.
That's right. So he is the risen and glorified Christ is standing in the midst of the churches.
Emmanuel.
Yes,
dude. So good.
This is his apocalyptic literature meant to encourage these churches in the midst of persecution and crisis. And the first thing they hear, Christ is with you.
With you.
I am with you.
How encouraging is that?
Incredible. Do not be afraid. The Lord is going to protect the church. The Lord is going to protect his church. The Lord is among you.
I had in verse 17, I had the story of Matthew when he was walking on the water and they were freaking out. They're like, what is this coming at us? And I'm sure there's and similar that fear. And what's the first words that Jesus says to the disciples? Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid.
It's me.
It's me. I'm here.
Right? And then here, these churches are freaking out like Rome is going to crush us. Don't be afraid. I'm
not
with you.
only that, but
I love that.
It also speaks volumes to us that Revelation could have gone from this vision of Christ straight to the beast, straight to the annihilation of things and the redemption of the world. But the story of God includes the church.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
churches
Mm-hmm.
are a part of this story, and
Right.
there's an intentionality to that. And so I think that's super important for us to hear, particularly as Western, Greek-influenced American Christians, that the church is not just a small part of the story of God.
Mm.
The church is a significant,
Mm-hmm.
essential part of the
Mm.
story of God.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we aren't part, or we divorce ourselves from the community of faith, and we only have this individualistic personal relationship with Jesus, we have really missed the point.
Right. And it makes the church more than just something that happens on a Sunday morning where I'm like, okay, let me check it off, say I've been, now I'm good.
Right.
Yeah.
It's essential. So let's unpack real quickly as we finish this podcast, these characteristics around this Christ vision, this Christ figure.
And I've talked about this real quick, is that
Yeah.
the church is God's plan A. There's no plan B.
There is no plan
I heard
B.
that once and I was like, that's
good.
That's cool. That's like convicting and like empowering, that like there's no plan B. Like we're, the church is it. So anyway.
That the post-resurrection, post-ascension, that Christ connected himself in the midst of the church. He connected himself to the churches.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a separation. I think that's really important.
Anyway,
okay.
Sorry.
So in the midst of the lampstands, verse 13, I saw one like the Son of Man, clothed a long robe and with a golden sash across his chest. This speaks to us. The long robe is a symbolism of a priest, really. The sash is a symbolism of the priest. And so I guess what does a priest do? What does that connect to us about who Christ is?
I guess the priest is kind of like, is a communicator on behalf of God. He's like, he's, well, I guess more powerful, but cares for people and like leads them, to righteousness and holiness. I mean, it kind of helps push them along in that journey, I guess, is kind of how I think of it,
Yeah. And then
they're a symbolic, figurehead for God and Christ, and, that's
and so in an Old Testament understanding of the priesthood, the priest was primarily existed as the intercessor for the people. Right. They stood between, right? Holy of Holies. They stood between the people and God.
Right,
and so this symbolism of a long robe with a golden sash across the chest is saying Christ is your intermediary. I'm here to stand between you and God, to be your intercessor. Verse 14, his head and his hair were white as white wool, white as snow. What is white? I guess that color,
purity and holiness.
Correct. Right there. Boom. So, and this Christ figure, this risen, glorified Christ figure is pure.
Right.
Everything about this figure is pure. His eyes were like a flame of fire.
Let's go.
In Daniel, he called it was fiery torches. What do you think that's about?
Well, I mean, fire is just like symbolic all throughout the Old Testament, New Testament. I mean, it represents kind of like Christ's presence or God's presence, and then obviously, yeah. So I think that's kind of how I see the fire. It's just all about God's presence. So
totally, God is found in fire. Fire also purifies. That's what it does. Fire
refines,
purifies. Yeah. So if Christ's eyes are what is fire, then there is like a purification with Christ looking at you. It's almost like the fiery flames of Christ's eyes look beyond the surface of what we present. I can see in you. I can see.
I see beyond.
I see beyond
the shell that you're putting up.
Yes.
To who you really are.
So there's this knowledge found within this,
and not only
Christ
just
figure.
Who you are, but like the goodness of who you actually are. Not just like, we always think, oh, he's seeing who I actually am and creates shame. But it's like, no, I see the good that I put in you at the beginning.
Yes, because the purification process takes place through those fiery flames too. It's so interesting.
Huge.
Okay. His feet, verse 15, were like burnished bronze, refined as in a furnace, and his voice, okay, we'll get to the voice, the burnished bronze, or some translations say polished brass. What this connects to is, if you remember in the Old Testament, King Nebuchadnezzar, who was King Nebo over Babylon, who was the arch enemy, took the Hebrews into exile. If you remember, there was a story about him where he erected a statue, or he had a vision or something where there was a statue erected Do you remember this? In his,
was it in Daniel though? Was that a story in Daniel?
I think it was. Anyway. It wasn't in Daniel. Oh, maybe it was in Daniel. I don't recall.
Anyway.
But in that story, this enormous statue of Nebuchadnezzar had like different metals,
Yes.
But the feet were made of clay, and I think it was, I don't know if it was iron and clay or some other metal and clay, but whatever it was, it wasn't strong. So even though the top half of Nebuchadnezzar was super strong, who represents the empire, the bottom was really weak. It was not going to last.
I think it was Daniel, actually, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
So this contrasts directly to that vision. So what it's saying is, see, Christ's feet are not clay. They're not going to be washed away. They're not going to, they are burnished, they are burnished bronze. This is like two metals that are wound together that are so strong that they're not going to disappear. They're not going to. And so there's a direct contrast with the empire.
Well, wasn't the vision of Nebuchadnezzar about empires, the empires that would come? And so, like God saying, like, I'm like, my empire will never move. Like you've seen empires come and go. I was there, and my empire started at the beginning. That
Right. Christ burnished bronze.
My kingdom. I don't even know. I don't know.
Totally.
Yeah.
And his voice with verse 15 still was like the sound of many waters. I guess, what does that speak to you? Like, what is the sound of many waters?
Well, there's like, I don't know. I mean, because what we always think of, like, when we want to calm down, we'll sit by a river and there's like, real light or whatever. When I think of many waters, I think of ocean waves, like in Hawaii, where in the winter when they're just crashing down and it's super loud, but there's like a relaxation, when you stay near the beach, you always want the door open because you kind of hear that rhythm, you hear that sound, and it just kind of, I don't know if it lulls you to sleep, but it just kind of gets you kind of in rhythm with your life.
But and Daniel says the voice was like the roar of the multitude of waters.
Right.
That word roar, I feel like there's power.
Right.
Even though it's also comforting, you don't want to be stuck in that roaring water.
Yeah, I just want to hear it.
You just want to hear it.
I don't want to be in it. Yeah,
so
for sure.
There's like this powerful voice that comes forth. And in his right hand, he held 7 stars, and from his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword in his right hand. So the 7 stars do represent the angels of the 7 churches. We're already told that. But there was also an understanding in this time period that, first of all, the right hand is super important because the right hand is a symbol of power. That's why Christ sits on the right hand of the Father. But the 7 stars also, back in this time period, they believed that there were 7 planets. And so when a symbolism sometimes of someone holding 7 stars meant that Christ also held the universe.
Okay, interesting.
And not just held it, but it's in his right hand. It's at his disposal.
Interesting.
So that this powerful figure of the power of the voice along with, and the universe is at my disposal for use, is kind of intense. And then from his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword. What is that?
I mean,
I guess what was the weapon of the empire?
I mean, it was the sword. I mean, it was the sword. It was
literally the sword.
Literally the sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think it would literally be the sword.
Yeah. They like high militarism. Like that was their thing.
Because it kept the peace.
Right. But in Christ, it's not, there is a sword, but what is it? Where is it coming from?
It's coming from his mouth.
Yes. So the words of Christ are the weapon.
The word is
the weapon.
Yeah.
And why it's 2-edged is because in a 2-edged sword, you've got great exhortation, great encouragement, along with holding people accountable. You know what I mean? So challenge. So this tells us that whatever this Christ figure is going to say,
it doesn't cut one way.
It cuts both ways.
Yep.
So this book is going to be filled with great comfort and great challenge. And
it's just setting you up, man.
Right. But both of those things are coming from the mouth of the Lord. Okay. So, and that's it. His face was like the sun shining with full force.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
an
obvious
everything
metaphor.
We just saw, right?
Yeah. So it's really important that we understand this vision, because this vision of the post-resurrection already ascended, glorified, risen Christ is now going to be dispersed among the churches. And we're going to discover that next week when we start looking at the letters of the churches. Okay.
All right.
All right.
So that's it? That's all you got?
So all we got is we have to realize that Christ stands in the middle of the 7 lampstands. He stands in the middle of the churches. He's with you. And not only that, you are a part of this story, churches.
Right.
Church with a capital C. We are part of this story. And we'll get more to that next week.
So let that be an encouragement to you and to all of us that Christ is with you. If you're not alone, that you're not just alone in your own, that Christ is with you, but then the community of Christ is also with you. And so I don't know if you see that or feel that, but may you discover that as you hear this.